What is going on, everyone? Today we are back checking out driving in Europe again for Americans. Specifically, can you drive in Sweden with an American license? I'm going to say no. And his shocking experience. This one's coming from the channel called Be Better. It's been a while since we've done anything related to driving licenses. Last time I did that, I actually took a driving license test, which is completely different than ours, and I got some hate mail from that. That was hilarious. Basically, someone told me to go fuck myself and that they hate America. Really, really great. Wonderful, wonderful way to jump back into this one. I'm really curious. I'm pretty sure you have to have a Swedish license, right, to drive in Sweden, but he's going to explain it for us. Maybe he got his license. I'm imagining so. Let's see what's going on. Smash like button. Let's dive in.
Having an American driver's license automatically line you up for being able to drive in Sweden? A lot of people are shocked by the answer. I'm going to answer that question as well as
Maybe
share a cautionary tale from my own experience of moving to this beautiful country over 4 years ago and trying to get my driver's license so you can learn from my own experience.
I would imagine maybe we're able to drive for like a short amount of time. We have to take some type of test, like if you're visiting and you have to drive a little bit. But I would imagine if you're like a permanent resident, you have to get a driver's license.
The answer is not black and white, and finding the answer can be quite challenging. So can you as an American use your driver's license and drive here in Sweden? Yes and no. Let me explain. Now, as a disclaimer, I'm not a legal expert. If you have other questions and want to go into deeper detail, I will have in the description below the link to the authority here in Sweden on all things related to driving and driver's licenses. They are the people to ask. This video is purely for educational and entertainment purposes. So I want to give a little bit of background about my driving history to kind of help you understand the bigger picture. I come from Texas. I got my driver's license at the age of 17. My first car was actually a 1985 Jeep Grand Wagoneer, the ones with the wood grain on the side and big giant chrome bumpers. It was a tank. And coming from that part of the world, you really need to have a vehicle. There is becoming more and more public transportation. Some places, like for example, in downtown Dallas, they've been putting in a very nice thing called the Dart Rail. But in most places in Texas and yes, the rest of the United States, having a vehicle is necessary. So it's kind of one's rite of passage to get a car and a driver's license. I was a pretty good driver, I think. I wasn't perfect. Nobody's a perfect driver, right? But I got no speeding tickets, no parking tickets. I remember I got one ticket for running a red light, and then we went back and reviewed the camera, and we found out that the camera actually picked up a bush moving, and it wasn't my car. I didn't break any rules. So I was a pretty good driver. Coming to Sweden has been an interesting cultural shock for me because in Sweden, they have pretty good public transportation system. But I would say compared to some of the other European countries, it's not the highest as the quality goes. There is some unreliability issues sometimes. There's a lot of jokes I hear Swedes say, if like one snowflake drops on the rails of the train, then the train will not go and there will be delays. I have a lot of coworkers that end up coming late to work because of delays on the train, especially if you live a bit outside of the city. So there is a lot of benefit to being able to drive. Also, not everybody thrives in a city. A lot of people would prefer to live out in the countryside. And then in my situation, I got my first job working in home health. And even though the office where I worked was located in the city had 3 different offices. And we all had the downtown area split up into thirds. But we all took care of a large swath of patients that lived out in the countryside. And because of that, you had to drive. I literally had a patient that it took an hour to get to, and you almost had to have 4-wheel drive. I remember one of the nurses that actually drove out there in the wintertime, she got the car stuck in mud. We don't get a lot of snow in this part of Sweden where we're at, but we do get a lot of rain, and so it got real muddy. And this old lady lived like down, out by some farm out in the middle of nowhere. So there's no way that you would be able to work with a bicycle. And what's fascinating to me is in Sweden, there is a very anti-car mentality here. And I get it a lot on social media. A lot of people are very against cars.
I feel like that's That's kind of like all across Europe. No, that's the impression that I've got is most people are like use public transport at least.
Which is kind of a shock for me coming from the United States. And then thinking from a realistic perspective, you still have a fire truck that's a car, you have ambulances, delivery, construction workers. There's just so many people that still need to have cars, and driver's license are needed for that. So a little story about when I first started working. I had only been in Sweden for 11 months. And a few months prior to that, in the first few months I came to Sweden, I actually didn't drive. And then I purchased a very old used Honda just to have kind of like an old hoopty to get around here in Sweden and get used to driving in Sweden. Now, it's not like I had never driven in Sweden. I had traveled to Sweden several times in the past. And of course, as a tourist, you are allowed to drive in Sweden with an American driver's license. And I decided I want to learn the right way to drive.
I wonder what you do here in the States. I have no idea. I mean, it's really easy to get a license in the States. They just hand them out to whoever, depending on the state that you're in. If you're in like California, you could literally jump off of a boat, walk in somewhere with a birth certificate, and get a license. They'll give it to anyone. No test, no nothing. They just give it to them.
I want to learn how to drive like a Swede and
I'm not
learn all the rules and get it right. And a lot of people say, oh, you can probably just go take the driving test. I'm like, no. A lot of the signage is different, and I want to learn it the right way. I got my car a few months, like I said, after moving to Sweden. And then after I finished studying Swedish, after 11 months, I immediately got a job in home health. Now, I asked them, I said, what is the orientation going to be like when I first move into this new job? And they said, you're going to get 2 weeks of being able to go with another nurse and get training. And so I thought, okay, great, I'll just go alongside them. So I show up to my first day of work, and the coordinator comes up to me and says, you have your driver's license, right? And I'm like, yeah, but it's like an American driver's license. She said, great, that's okay. Here's the car keys, and here's a list of all the patients that need to be seen. I had zero orientation. I was like panicking. And my first question was, is it an automatic or is it a manual? Because where I come from, automatic is kind of the norm. We do have manual cars, but like my dad and mom could drive, and even my sister and brother, they
don't tell me he's never driven a manual before. That was a requirement from my parents, was your first car has to be a manual. You need to learn how to drive a manual. So I had a 1996 Mustang that I drove and crashed like 8 months later. Only accident I've ever been in. I've only gotten one ticket, I think it was a phone. It was like 8 years ago. I was on my phone while I was driving. Not really. I've just had it in my hand. But yeah, one accident, one ticket. Ever since then, I drive like a grandpa now. Really, really slow.
Could drive a manual because they all had those kinds of cars. My first car was an automatic. That's what I learned on. And so that's what I was used to. I never really was in a situation where I had to drive a manual. And so I'm like, is it automatic at least? And they're like, yeah. I was going to be driving the nurse around that was going to be orienting me. And I found out she did not have a driver's license despite being an adult. And I'm like shocked because like this is like a normal thing, like a rite of passage when you're a teenager in the States. And because of that, it really affected her work. Most of the people that worked there where we worked did not have driver's license, and it was a real big problem because we would get, say, like a phone call from a patient that's way out in the countryside, and we'd need to have someone that had a driver's license to zoom out there and go check on the patient and help them out. So I was in the process of getting my nursing license, and I was able to drive the nurses around and go do errands, drop off things, go check on patients. So having the driver's license really came in handy. I soon learned that a lot of people actually want driver's licenses, but one of the biggest challenges is not just hard to learn how to drive here, and it's a very lengthy program. The other challenge is it's extremely expensive to get a driver's license. The classes cost a lot of money, and I figured that out from my own experience. So it is good to have a driver's license here in Sweden because, as I said, it does help you with work if you're in some sort of a job where you're actually going to be traveling a whole lot, because it's unrealistic to be riding on a bicycle out in the countryside delivering things, or if you have to get to someone really quick in an emergency, or if you need to be carrying very heavy things. But I soon learned the process of figuring out how I was going to get a driver's license was very difficult, and it was clear as mud to me at the time as to how long my American driver's license would apply, and I didn't want to do anything illegally. So I went down to a driving school, and this is by no means an advertisement for them. It is Mortenson's driving school. I was a bit nervous about it already because I remembered how it was for my first driving experience, over 20 years ago as a teenager. And I just wanted to make sure I got with someone that was a good teacher. So I was like, well, what about, is it in English? So that was another concern I had. And they said, it's not a problem. He speaks English and Swedish. And the tests, you can do them in English if you want to. And a lot of the educational material was in English, is what I was told at the beginning. And I'm like, okay, so how does this work? And they're like, okay, well, you can go for one ride with the driver and they'll just do an assessment, kind of see what your driving skills are like. And then they can kind of estimate how many classes that they're going to recommend. So it wasn't like required that I had to actually take these classes, but they wanted to make sure that they gave me a good rough estimate as to how many classes I probably needed to take to get comfortable with driving the Swedish way and learn the rules. So after we went out,
I feel like if I move to a country, especially a place like Sweden, somewhere where the language is not English, I don't think I would move somewhere until I got the language down. I'm sure maybe his job was a little bit quicker, like he moved out there pretty fast and didn't pick up the language that quick, but I for sure would 100% make sure that I am close to fluent before I move to another country. I just want to make sure I fit in with the culture, not try and come in speaking a different language everywhere and trying to make people adapt to me. Call me crazy.
And did kind of a test run. They said, 6, 7 classes, that should be enough. And then in addition to that, you have to do these things that are called risk 1 and risk 2. I did the driving stuff. That went pretty well. Not really too many crazy things there. And then we got down to risk 1 and 2. Then the problem arose that in order to sign up for risk 1 and 2, you have to have a certain number. You need a person number, but there was an exception that could be made for me at the time, and you could have a temporary person number. So a person number is the Swedish version of a tax identification number, or like in America, it's a social security number. I was not able to get this number because even though I was legally in the country and I was legally working, I had not gotten a work permit, and that's a whole nother story. You can look at my other videos to learn about that. I was working in Sweden on a student extension permit, which allows you to work. Because of that, I could only get a temporary tax identification number, and that opens up some doors, but not all doors for you. So I did not have the ability to actually sign up for the driving test, but I could sign up for the classes, and that's what I did. And they said, once you get the personal identification number, the permanent one, then we can sign you up for the actual class.
It's a lot. He just keeps going. I'm like, one thing after another that you got to do. So it's a huge process. All right.
My driver's license actually apply for? Well, the driver's license that I had from America, they said, as long as it's not expired in the United States, it is good for 12 months from the time that I get registered in Sweden. I'm like, well, what does registered mean? Does registered mean from the time I got my temporary coordination number? Does it mean from the time I get my personal identification number? And I was having a very difficult time getting some clear answers. And so to help you avoid all the confusion, I will tell you what I finally figured out. So once you get a permanent tax ID number or a personal identification number, not the temporary one, then you are able to sit for the exams. You will have to do one that is like in a classroom setting, and then you will do one that is an actual, you get in the car and you're with someone that is observing and testing you. Then after that, if you pass, then you can get your driver's license. Another issue is you need a photo ID card that is made in Sweden. They won't take your passport from America. They won't take your driver's license from America. They need a Swedish ID card. I could not get a Swedish ID card until I had a personal identification number. So there's a whole lot of steps. It's a lot of bureaucracy. And if you're like me and you're coming here and you have no family here, you weren't sponsored by a job to come here, you're not in any sort of relationship with anyone, it's going to be a whole lot harder to get that tax identification number. You need to have a residency permit that allows you to stay in Sweden for more than 13 months. So I had done all the coursework. I even passed risk 1 and risk 2. So risk 1, it's like you learn about falling asleep at the wheel and drinking and driving and that sort of thing. It's like a several hour thing. And then after that, you have to
several hours to learn to not fall asleep and not drink. That's crazy. What?
take risk 2, which was pretty fun. You actually get to go out. We went out in the winter time, and there was actually snow on the ground, and they make you drive in a car really fast with like no tire tread and make you go around in circles, and they try to make you go out of control on purpose so that you can feel what it feels like to lose control on an icy or snowy road. And that was a really cool experience, but it kind of shakes a lot of people up. So after I did that, then I was able...
Never brake, step on the gas when you start sliding. I remember some of these because I used to have to drive through snow all the time. Most people usually, like here in America, I don't know if you guys ever seen these videos where we have like a huge snowstorm and the pileups are just insane. You'll see people flying down the highway and then there's like, you know, something going on. The highway stopped and everyone just immediately turns their wheel and slams on the brake instead of like shifting down gears or like going into, even in an automatic, you can lower the gear. They usually have the 1, 2, and 3 underneath the drive. It always blows my mind. I've seen some horrible pileups.
The next step would be taking the 2 exams. And like I said, then I hit a standstill because I had no personal identification number. So I started getting worried because I'm like, I'm going to forget everything I learned, and months are going by because that was in the winter when I finished the last thing. I'd already done the driving classes. I'd already done risk 1 and 2. Months went by, as I said. I want to say it was probably like May. So yeah, 3, 4, 5 months later, I finally got a job offer where I'm currently working, and that job offer opened the door for a permanent residency.
I wonder if any Swedish that are watching, do you guys, like when you first got your license, do you plan to like take your test in the summertime so it's not snowy? You don't have to really deal with that. I would imagine that some people probably do that. Or does it not matter at all? Maybe the driving instructors are a little bit more lenient if it is snowing. I have no idea.
And that permanent residency opened up the door to get a personal identification number, and that personal identification number opened up the door to get a photo ID, and that photo ID opened up the door to be able to go back to the driving school and sign up for those tests. And I passed on the first try on all of them. So
nice.
To answer your question, yes, you can drive with an American driver's license as long as it's valid.
12 months.
And you can only do it for a certain amount of time. That time is really going to depend on a lot of factors, as you can see from my own story. I did not get registered in this country. I was here legally, but I was not registered permanently as a resident with a tax identification number, a personal person number, for almost 2 years of living here. So I was legally driving here with an American driver's license because it wasn't expired. And then I was able to sit for that last exam, and I got the last exams done probably a month or 2 after I got my personal identification number and my photo ID. Hope this video helped.
All right, really interesting. It seems like he said, there is a lot of bureaucracy behind it, a lot of hoops you have to jump through to kind of get it done. Hey, I'm all for it, because here in the States, like I said, each one is a little bit different, and they're getting a lot stricter on it, but they were just handing out driving licenses to everyone. Also, semi-truck drivers, which we've been having a huge problem of semi-truck drivers causing major accidents in the country because they're immigrants that come over. Usually a state like California or Oregon or New York will just hand them a Class C license to drive a super heavy piece of machinery, a semi-truck, and they just like jackknife it on the highway. They ram into things. It's absolutely crazy. So I'd probably much rather prefer to have it the way Sweden does it. Really, really interesting. All right, cool. Appreciate you guys watching. I'm gonna get out of here. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.